Hey everybody, this is Liz from Augusta, and today I have a special guest from Canada, and I am going to let him introduce himself and tell you where he's from and kind of where he is in relationship to Washington State, where Mike and Augusta headquarters is.
So, hello everyone. My name is Max Harwood. I live in Langley, but actually my service area is Burnaby, B.C. But this is just slightly north of Bellingham and Blaine. So it's just across the border on the Canadian side.
So you and I probably live 15 minutes from each other, and yet we're in separate countries, and we have the border in between us to deal with. So it seems like you're so far away, and yet you're right here.
Yeah, exactly. And it is kind of funny how the culture is just like slightly different in the States and in America, and yet it's so close.
It is. Even the two accents that we have between each other. Tell me, were you raised in that area? Tell me a little bit about your family and how you grew up and your relationship now with who you're with, if you're married and have kids.
Sure. So I was born in British Columbia in the Okanagan in a town called Vernon and lived in the Okanagan area for most of my young years, so until grade 9. And then my family moved to 100 Mile House, which is sort of right in the middle of British Columbia, but it's quite northern compared to it's odd in Canada. A lot of the people live right next to the border because we're fleeing the cold.
Yes.
And that's the warmest area. But so lots of snow up there. There's sometimes school would be canceled because it would be minus 35 in the morning,
Wow.
and they didn't want you to wait outside for the bus in that weather. So I remember being in high school and listening to the radio in the morning and being like, oh, it's a cold day. I wonder if school will be canceled. But then came to Abbotsford in British Columbia. So a lot of this is BC right now, but went there for college. That's where I met my wife at Columbia Bible College. So that's associated with the Mennonites, but it's like a broadly evangelical Bible college because I was training to be a pastor. And then once we were married, we moved to Calgary, Alberta, and lived there for 3 years. I was studying at seminary there to get my master's, and I actually transferred schools and finished my master's at the University of Toronto. And so we were in Toronto for a year, then we moved back and have been here since.
Excellent. So those of you who don't know, Canada has provinces, not states. How many provinces are there?
Oh, dang, that's a trick question. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
There's not 50, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, they're huge. They're huge. And then there's some
Exactly.
territories as well. And
So,
most of the people live in BC or Ontario.
right. So it looks like you were in three. You were in Toronto, you were in Edmonton or Alberta, and then you were also over here in BC. This Vernon and 100 Mile House, how far away are they from here?
From like Blaine and the Lower Mainland area.
Yep.
So the Okanagan is about 5 hours east, and or maybe it's a little less than that, but it's just north of. There's Osoyoos, and then Orville, Washington is just south of that. And so my wife's family actually has a cabin on the lake in Orville, and it's super beautiful. So we spend a lot of time there, and she grew up going there most summers, and they've got a lot of fruit trees there. So just a wonderful area. And then 100 Mile House, yeah, would be 5 hours north of the Lower Mainland.
Yeah, just
And
just to
Blaine.
give people an idea of where those places are, and that, like you're saying, everybody comes and there's a swarmed area in Langley, Vancouver, this area. Can you tell people what it's like there? Housing, the prices of housing, is there housing? If somebody moved there, how difficult would it be to get a place? And then I'm asking this because how does it give you density for your routes?
So it's unique. It's probably one of the most expensive. It is. I think it's number 3 in terms of most expensive real estate in the entire world. So an average standalone house in the entire Lower Mainland. So this would be like Vancouver is kind of the central hub, and then it goes out from there, and you've got these different cities, but they're all overlapping. And so you've got like Burnaby and Coquitlam. If you go south, you've got Richmond, and south from that, Ladner. And if you go over here, you've got Langley. But it's all kind of like this metro Vancouver area. And I don't identify particularly as being from Langley. I just think I'm from the Lower Mainland,
Okay.
Metro Vancouver. And I think a lot of people, there's so much travel between these areas, but an average standalone house would be at least $1 million. And
Wow.
that's tricky because the minimum down payment on a property over $1 million in Canada is 20%. And so you need at least $200,000 cash just to get into one of these houses. And that might be a fixer-upper. It might not be a nice house. It might be actually a horrible house in some circumstances. It's just because the land is so valuable.
Mm-hmm.
So rent is also quite expensive. I think here we got in at an okay time. So we rent a basement suite. It's about 1,400 square feet, and we pay about $1,400 per month for that. It has since gone up. So I think it'd probably be about $2,000 per month for a basement suite. So it's definitely a challenge on the housing front. Other things are pretty comparable in terms of the price of food or fuel or other commodities across the country. It's just really housing that takes up a lot, and people's down payment and mortgage that really costs quite a bit. So our area is mostly in Burnaby and New Westminster and East Vancouver. We just focus on targeting Burnaby and New Westminster at this time. And there's about 600,000-ish people in our territory.
Wow.
And it's extremely dense. It's extremely urban. We just use vans to get from property to property. So it's really good in that sense. You can charge a lot per square foot. And I enjoy that kind of setting.
Yeah. So in a day, your routes are pretty dense in that you go to one area and you can stay in the same area for quite a while in a day.
Yes. Like I don't technically live in my service area, but once you're in that area that we are servicing, and all my employees are currently living in that area, it's very easy to get around. And so we just divide the city up into quadrants and service those on different days. And
Smart.
It's usually just like a 1 to 2 minute drive between properties. Occasionally we'll do more of a spread of the city if we're doing more occasional services. So something like aeration or power raking, even those we will try to group together, but occasionally they do get a little spread out.
Excellent. Well, we'll come back to some of the details of that, but let's start at the beginning. Your upbringing, did you have family, siblings? Kind of what was your upbringing like?
Yeah, so my family is kind of interesting. I had a very stable upbringing, but prior to me, there was a lot of divorce in my family. So I was very fortunate to be born at a time when my mom was married to my stepdad, and that was a very stable relationship. So that really sets the course of one's life in incredible ways. So it's a huge blessing. But prior to that, like my biological father was married before marrying my mom. So there's like a half brother from that relationship who's about 12 years older than me. So we didn't really grow up together, but amicable relationship. And then from my mom's side, she was formerly married, not only to my biological father, but actually prior to that. So she's been married 3 times. And in the first marriage, she had 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl. And so the half brother there is also about 12 years older than me.
Wow.
He currently lives in Taiwan. And then my sister is about 10 years older than me. So I'm definitely the baby of the family. But I wasn't an accident, apparently. So
yes. So it sounds like you're going to break the cycle.
Yeah. So it changed a lot. Like my parents converted to Christianity. That changed a lot of things in their life. We all did kind of at the same time. I was about 6 or so, and that set us on the right trajectory. And I think they just got a lot more stable in terms of their career and vocation. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
Excellent. And are you married? Do you have children?
Yes. Yeah. I'm married to Michaela. We met at Columbia Bible College in Abbotsford, and we have 2 daughters. One is 3 years old, well, 3.5, and one is 1.5. We're planning to have like 1 or 2 more, and it's a lot of work, but it's a wonderful experience.
You guys are busy. You're going to be busy for a long time.
Yeah, totally. I think that sometimes I think like, what's the hardest thing? And I think that having kids is the hardest thing.
Yeah, I've asked older people many times what is the best age that when you were raising kids, and all of them say around 10 to 11 because they still love you and they're fun.
Yeah, but they're kind of self-contained, like they know how to take care of themselves to a certain extent. Self-directed, that's the word.
Yeah, exactly. And then later on they don't like you, and then they come back around till they think you're the best thing that ever happened and appreciate all the wisdom you have.
Totally. And we think a lot about what kind of educational setting we want to place our kids in, because in Canada, like, there's the public education system, but there are certain parts of the curriculum that are very wonky in terms of
Hmm.
what they'll teach about gender and other things too. So we've considered like homeschooling them or like a private Christian education, because that's just so fundamental. Like, who you surround yourself with is, they're spending so much time there. It's going to
Hmm.
determine who they are.
You were saying that your family lives in a basement suite. That's really common there, isn't it? Because most families can't even afford a home.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, of our peer group, like all of the friends that Michaela went to school with around here, I don't think any of them own like a freestanding home. There's maybe one of her friends or two of her friends that own a condo that's
Hmm.
pretty small. Maybe it's like 600 to 800 square feet, and they don't have any kids yet. Um, and then definitely of my friends that I met at college, like, I don't think any of the guys own a home. So it is pretty rare. There are certain friend groups, like
Hmm.
Michaela's sister is married to a guy. He's Dutch Reformed, and didn't go to college, just went straight to working. And I think a lot of his peer group just did the same thing and were in more of the trades. And those guys have purchased homes. So it depends on the group that you're associated with.
Yeah, I would say about 90% of the people I know that live up there in the lower mainland share a residence with other people, below, beside, somebody in the top, that maybe the owner even lives in the bottom, so that they can actually afford the place and then rent the upstairs for a higher price. So that should give people listening that are down in Louisiana and pay for a 6-bedroom brick home, uh, $40,000, $50,000, a little idea of what you deal with all the time in your expenses. So let's go to when you first heard about Augusta. Tell us about that.
So I started a lawn care business about 2.5 years ago, and I really wanted to become educated in that. This is the first time I've been in business. I've never done it before. So I like to learn. I like to listen to podcasts and those sorts of things. So I started to explore YouTube, and initially found some of the owner operators like Brian's Lawn Maintenance and listened to some of their content.
Mm-hmm.
Then moved on to Jonathan Potoshnik, the lawn care millionaire, so called. And he was really, really great, super helpful content. So listened to everything that he put out. And then after I had gone through that, I thought, what's next? And came across Mike Andes and found his content very helpful, particularly the conference recordings. I felt like in that
Mm,
live atmosphere, he was really at his best. So that's how it began.
fantastic. What was it about him? He's how old are you?
I'm 31 currently.
You're 31, so you're a little bit older than him. What was it about this young guy that really attracted you to him? I know he's not like anybody else we know, per se, but what was it that was different about him that you thought you would actually have confidence to listen to what he had to say?
Well, he's intelligent and he works hard, and those are the two necessary ingredients for success, as well as a stable life. So I saw that he treated it as a business, and that he wasn't just concerned about the minutia of
Hmm.
day-to-day operations. Those are important, obviously, but had like a larger vision. And that was intriguing to me, because some of the other content was very surface level. So I found a depth with my candies that was really helpful.
You're very well educated and you went to seminary. And so, what caused you to deviate from that? Or are you still doing that in addition to the lawn mowing business?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't want to get too into the weeds about like different streams of Christianity, but to summarize, I grew up in the evangelical church. That's like from the Protestant tradition, and have a lot of respect for Protestantism in general. There's a lot of good things in terms of like the devotion to scripture or the discipline. But when I was going to seminary, I was just learning more about the tradition of Christianity, or like the history of Christianity, because obviously it came to us from somewhere, and was really intrigued by that. And so my wife and I started going to an Eastern Orthodox church, which is more traditional. It has a lot of rituals that are very ancient, or prayers like from the year 300 from, say, the church fathers. The people, there's the apostles that followed Christ, and then after the apostles, they passed it on to other people. And so the Orthodox Church has a strong connection with those other people that came after. So we decided to join the Orthodox Church. It's very small, very niche in Canada, and there aren't a lot of paid positions. And just because I do have a family, there are certain material responsibilities I have as a father and as a husband to provide, and there weren't really any openings in Canada. And even if there were, generally church work doesn't pay a lot, which is
True.
understandable, and it's
Right.
good in a way, because you don't want people to go into it with the wrong purposes.
Right.
However,
Right.
we do live in quite an expensive area, and so there are, again, financial necessities just to live here, and a lot of Michaela's family is here. My parents hopefully will move down in the future, so it didn't seem feasible at this stage. However, if the business grows to a certain stage, I would like to spend more time just teaching and preaching and helping out at the local church.
Thank you for describing all that. That's very helpful when we think about you and then going into business, because providing for your family is the most important thing. And so seeing you come into Augusta and hearing about Mike, you're very well educated. So when you started to hear about the franchise from him, what made you feel like there would be something beneficial for you to even become a part of it?
Well, two things. Like, I really appreciate the flexibility of the franchise, and I also really appreciate the community. So on the flexibility side, I enjoy the fact that it's still like I still have my own business. So the franchise is like a business within a business, or that would be my location, and that's unique, I think, to other franchises. Like, other franchises will actually they will own the customers, they will make the decisions about operations, and essentially what you might be buying is more of a job than a business that can become an asset that creates cash. So I enjoyed the amount of freedom that was granted, because I like experimenting with things. I like modifying things and just doing them a little bit differently where we are. And also there was the safety of being able to leave Augusta if it wasn't working out as expected. And again, that's just so huge. So the freedom afforded was really good. And I think it would be good for other people that are independently minded or want to just grow as an individual, because sometimes, you need to take on responsibility to grow as an individual. And sometimes that means doing things slightly differently, not in a bad way, but you do have that freedom within Augusta. So it's not just for people that want something that's like copy and paste, although you can definitely do that, but there's also the latitude to do things somewhat differently and somewhat in a unique way. So that's really good. And then the community is huge. Is like, that's probably the main reason, because within Augusta, you have a team of people that you're playing alongside, that you're not competing with, that you can learn from. And so that's kind of twofold. On one hand, you can learn from their previous experience, because there's people that have been in this industry doing it for a very long time, and they've gained experience through those years. So to be able to tap into that is huge. But then going forward, we're all actually focusing on the same problems, and we're going to move that much faster because we've got a bunch of minds focusing on the same thing and looking at it from different angles. So that's just so much more powerful than an individual out on their own. Even if they're extremely gifted, they're not going to move as fast as having the team. So the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It's like, sometimes I like to think of it as a math equation. It's like 1 + 1 = 3. It actually doesn't equal 2. There's
100%.
something
Yeah.
greater that happens when you're in a group environment.
Yeah, I love it. So you were just talking about being independently minded and making sure you have something on the side, really as a plan B, fallback, something to fall back on if this doesn't work out. How does that work when you're the type of person that is very articulate like you are? You're very good at, why this, why that? And it challenges Augusta even to change systems, to think stuff through, or to say, no, if we did that for you and our goal is 1,000 locations, are we going to mess it up if we try to do this for you every time just right and it's out of the system? And the answer is no way, it won't work. So how do you bring yourself to do the systems of Augusta? Is it because it's flexible enough that I'm going to follow these systems to do this thing, but outside around here, I have the flexibility to do all this other stuff the way I want to run the business? Is that the way you think about it?
Yeah, I think like Augusta, in terms of something like Command Center, it's a tool that I need to learn how to use effectively. And so there's like the learning curve that comes in there. And then there's parts that, like with the facility side, I think it's in terms of like operations, like we use vans, we don't use trucks. Augusta doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
All the clients are our own. And so that's really important just from like an economic perspective in terms of being able to capitalize on that. And yeah, I haven't seen it as like a hindrance or anything. Like we are on board with pay for performance from the beginning. We were just doing 100% maintenance and focusing on recurring services. Like I don't know how to do any of the landscaping stuff. So there was a lot where we were already on the same trajectory as Augusta, and it felt like a very natural marriage. And I just saw it as a way to continue and to grow faster, and to learn a lot more. Because one of the reasons I got into business was to learn by doing, because I was just curious about the world of business. And prior to this, I had done a lot of learning by sitting in the classroom, which is very valuable, but it's a different kind of learning. And so I was curious about just getting in there and learning through experience and learning about business, because it's actually so fundamental, especially in North America. And it's a great way to talk to people, actually, because there's so many people that are in the world of business in one way or another, whether they're an employee or a business owner, and just to have the vocabulary and the experience to connect with them is really cool.
Did you have a lawn care business before you came to Augusta, or did you just look at it and think, if I want to do this, I got to pick something?
I did have a business. I purchased a list of clients 2.5 years ago, and ran that it was kind of in the middle of the season, so it was an odd time to start, is around July. And I purchased a list of these biweekly clients that were way underpriced. It felt like in the game of Monopoly, how there's like those cheap properties at the beginning. I think one of them was Baltic Avenue, so I felt like I'm buying Baltic Avenue right now. And it was great to just hit the ground running with a number of clients. So there was about 80 properties that I was taking care of, and technically about 60 clients. Some of them owned multiple properties, and went right into it, and then did snow removal throughout the first year. And then in the next season, that was kind of my first spring rush, and was running as, it was called Zenith Lawn Care, and still the corporation that holds the license for Augusta is Zenith Lawn Care. But so it was like a year and a half completely independent, but technically I joined Augusta in September of that following year, and then converted to Augusta in January. So we've had at this point 1 full year as Augusta, and a year and a half as just more or less an independent operation.
So you've had 1 full season, really, and you're going into your second. So how are you feeling in regards to last year and this year? Are you excited? Do you feel kind of nervous? You saw what you did last year, you know the mistakes, and you know what went well. How are you feeling about now? Like, we are just going right into the beginning of it. For those listening, it's March, the end of March. So how are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling good. I'm looking forward to getting more mowing clients and more treatment clients. We're trying to focus more on that and not as much on the property cleanups, although we will do those throughout the summer. And we are doing them right now because the schedule is a little bit thin. But I think last year we overpurchased assets. We were expecting a little more growth just based on the average Augusta multiple on marketing dollars spent. And there's lots of reasons why it may not have grown as much. But I think one of the main ones is we just focus on the recurring work. So we just, honestly, we do mowing, we do garden bed weeding, we do property cleanups, and we do treatments. We don't do any mulch, we don't do any gravel, we don't do anything like that. And that's intentional. It's to make management actually a lot easier, because the vehicles all go home with the employees. And anyways, this year, I think we've got all the assets we need in terms of vehicles. So I think that we can actually grow top line revenue and profit at the same time this year, just because we've made a lot of the larger purchases previously. And it's helpful to just go through a season and have the confidence from that and the lessons learned now going into this season. So I feel a lot more comfortable with the team. And I think in terms of my temperament, I can care too much. I can be too nice. And so it's good to learn that about yourself. It's good to learn who you are, because then you can kind of moderate your behavior. And so for me, I can back off a little bit and just know that ultimately with clients and with employees, first of all, I have a business model that works. And so I don't need to question the business model at this point. Because
Right.
initially, I think you do need to be pretty flexible with your business model because you
Mm-hmm.
don't actually know if it's going to fit with clients or with employees. But once you get it to a place where it fits with them, then you can kind of lock it down. And that's actually really freeing mentally because you don't need to question yourself as much at that point, although it can change as time goes on. But that is really helpful going into this year. And just knowing that with employees and with clients, it's all about cooperation. And I can do my part, but I can't actually bring it all the way to them. They have to cooperate with me. And that's where I just have to back off sometimes and say, well, I've done what I can. They don't want to cooperate, and we'll move on to a new employer, a new client.
Mm-hmm. So can you tell us last year as compared to this year, what was last year's revenue, amount of employees, and amount of trucks that you were working with?
Last year, we grossed 280,000, and it was like 120% increase over the prior year. And we had 4 vans. They came kind of at different points because
Mm-hmm.
some of them I ordered. It was really hard to find used
Oh, I
vehicles, and
bet.
so I had
Since
to
COVID, it's
purchase.
crazy.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, the used vehicles are sometimes, if you do a like per kilometer analysis
Mm-hmm.
of the vehicles, the new vehicles are cheaper than the
Oh,
used
wow.
vehicles. It's insane. So so the new ones we got, there's 4 of them, and employees 3 employees throughout the year, like in terms of positions, although we experienced a lot of churn in the summer, and that's because we were trying to fill a role. And I think definitely part of that was my fault because I was so rushed with trying to get someone that we were
Right.
just going straight into work, and they would be with me and I would try to take it slow with them, but I wasn't doing just the day of orientation to settle them into things.
Mm-hmm.
So we burned through a lot of people in the summer. And I think on the other side, it was a super hot labor market, and it was
Yeah.
very difficult to find people. So
Right.
sometimes we'd find someone that seemed like a great fit. They would say it was good. I'd always ask
Mm-hmm.
them at the end of the day, like, what did you think of today? Was it an okay job? Do you see yourself doing this? And they say,
Yeah.
oh, yes, I would absolutely do this. And then the next morning they text me and say, it's not for me. So that's just, it's understandable because like I'm the owner and the boss. I
Right.
just see them as another individual. It's like we are 2 people and we're trying to accomplish this team and this
Yes.
goal together, but they see it differently. So um so it was a bit of a challenge in the middle of the season.
So going into this season, what are you looking for growth? And how are you trying to get more employees? And then do you plan to add to your fleet of trucks, vans?
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully we don't have to purchase more vans, but if necessary we will. I do actually have an order for one of those high top vans. We've got one of those currently in the fleet, but I put this order in last April, and I just called the dealership and I said, any word on this thing? And they said, no, we don't even have a VIN generated for it, so we've got no idea when it's coming. So that's just the backlog that they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
But we're hoping for 500,000 in gross revenue thereabouts,
Awesome.
and I don't think that we'll have to purchase more vehicles. We've got some smaller vans that are just better for one guy, and then we've got a larger van that I'm going to try having 2 guys in that this season. But I think if we just fill those all to capacity, we'll be able to reach our goal.
Excellent. So a little bit about these vans. You must use push mowers only, I'm assuming.
Yes, correct.
And on the bigger vans, are you able to put 2, say, 30-inch in there, and then you put all your tools on the side? Are they custom built on the sides to hold all your tools and blowers and everything?
Yes. So yeah, we've got the one bigger van. My father-in-law and I, thankfully he's a handyman. He's like super skilled, has been doing it for a long time. So he helped me out a lot. I definitely couldn't do it on my own. But with the bigger vans, we take them to an upfitter, and they're able to install like a partition between the cab and the bed, and
Sweet.
also to install a ramp that's like a
Mm-hmm.
bifold ramp that comes out of the side door, which is nice because actually the mower goes in sideways, so it's not like sliding back and forth when you're stopping, because it's I don't know, I'm gonna explain this
Mm-hmm.
right words, but we also have racks on the side for the combi systems that they hang on, and then the blower has like some hooks that you can hang it on. We only use 21-inch mowers because a lot of the properties are super small, and you couldn't actually get into the backyard with a 30-inch mower.
True.
And In the larger van, you can use you can get two of the 21 inches beside each other, and that's what I did my first year when I just had a helper. We would have two mowers, and typically the helper would just do the mowing, but sometimes on the larger yards, which are few and far between, you'd get out the second one, but it was more of a backup.
So this really shows the area of the country we live in and how the population is so tight that housing is even difficult to find. And some of our franchisees in, say, Virginia or somewhere, they don't even use a push mower for anything because all they have are huge properties and lots of land. So for you, when you figure out your rate matrix and how you want this to look, are you going per square foot and taking the consideration of the 21-inch mower? Can you explain how that works to our listeners?
Sure, yeah. So we just base everything on how long it would take to mow with a 21-inch mower, and it takes a little. I mean, when you join Augusta, they do have like established rates that you can just tap into, which is really helpful. We had previous rates that we developed just based on how long it would take on average per property per square foot. And so what's nice is you can just measure a property online, and you can do this like extremely fast. And definitely I would dissuade anyone listening from trying to go to properties in person and look at them and measure, because it's actually very subjective, and it's kind of annoying actually. I hate creating even like property cleanup quotes. It's like I don't actually like them very much because it is quite subjective. Whereas just measuring the square foot is just so much easier, and it's way more accurate in general. So I love being able to go online or have Command Center go online and just measure the property and generate a quote based on the square footage for mowing or for treatments. It's really fast, it's really easy, and it's really consistent.
So those on the eastern states, though, they're listening to you and they're thinking, okay, he has 21-inch mowers, and if he had some of these bigger properties, it would change everything about what he was doing. He would have to have trailers to put large mowers in. Is that a fact, though? Would you get larger mowers, or do you think you could still charge the same and charge the same according to your matrix? And would you still use 21-inch, do you think?
I mean, like maybe we'd use 30-inch or something in other area. I've never operated like a ride-on mower or anything. I've only used the 21-inch mower ever. I've never used anything bigger. So I'm not 100% sure, but I know that in general in Augusta, you try to measure it based on like the smallest piece of equipment that you have, so that it'll be profitable even with that. And in general, also you want to try to standardize the equipment that you're using just so it's easier to train guys, because that's one of the big bottlenecks. Like it's not necessarily finding the work, it's having the laborers. And so if you can streamline the training process, then it'll just make your life a lot easier. So I think if you standardize your equipment and have prices that work with the smallest piece of equipment, then you're in business.
So what you've done is really smart. It's not the way that most people go, but you simplified services. You have these, most of the guys would say, little bitty mowers. You don't have all this flashy equipment, but you said you grew 120% year over year growth from the year before last to last year, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So it shows that you can streamline these things and systematize them, and then the systems make make it all happen for you.
Totally. And like I don't meet the guys every day. The trucks go home with them. We have a storage locker that they can go and get equipment themselves. They are self-motivated people that I look for. I give them a personality test. I make sure that they're high in conscientiousness and low in neuroticism, because that's what the psychologist Jordan Peterson has said is important for workers that are doing repetitious work. So I always hire based on that. It's not a guarantee, but all my good employees do have those character traits, and I'm able to stay home. I mean, I go out in the field and I do stuff, but I'm not required to be out in the field. And so last year there was a week where the guys were power raking, doing a lot of stuff. I was busy running the business. I didn't go do anything in that week, and we generated $15,000 in gross revenue. And so it's just, I think, like if you're able to afford yourself a certain amount of mental margin, you'll be a lot better in business. Because if you hate your life and if you think that it's not fun, and there's times like that, you do have to push through it, obviously, but if at all possible, I've tried to set things up so that it's easier to manage and just I'm not the bottleneck in everything.
Yeah, that is so awesome. That's going to help so many people that hear this. The mental margin, human capacity. It's all like you're the type of person that really jumps in, gets into all the nitty gritties, figures it out, but you don't seem to be as emotional, which is a great benefit to you.
Yeah, I think that is generally a benefit. Sometimes, if you're not as emotional, you get criticized by people and made fun of a little bit, but
Uh,
it's a good thing to keep your head.
Yeah, well, you've been great to work with for us. You're always pushing buttons and trying to figure things out. And I remember the first day I met you, and it was just like all these questions sitting at the table together. It was really great. So, how did you get the guys to do this personality test? How did you stage it to them? And then what's the test? Because I know a lot of people would be interested to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just have like a step-by-step process that I go through when I'm hiring someone. I don't actually meet with them in person until the first day of training, which is also unusual. But the first stage is just a phone interview. That's, sometimes it's only 5 minutes, but it's a script that I'm going through.
Hmm.
And then after that, I call their references and make sure that they have good things to say. And then the third stage is to send this personality test. And so the website is understandmyself.com. You can, if you're a business owner, purchase a number of these personality vouchers that you can send to potential employees, and they complete it. And then I just ask them to either take a screenshot or just copy and paste the results over to me. And then I don't read it at this point in depth. I just look
Hmm.
at the conscientiousness section and make sure that
Hmm.
that is high. And so that breaks down into orderliness and industriousness. So orderliness is obviously how you organize your life. Industriousness is your ability to work hard. And then neuroticism, which is basically sensitivity to negative emotion. And so another way to put that is emotional stability.
Hmm.
And so you want low neuroticism, which is actually high emotional stability. So those are the two things that I look at. And then I proceed from there with offering them an informal position. I
Okay.
have them do a couple other things, but then we meet in person for the first day of training.
And then is there a trial period?
Yes.
Because you haven't met them in person before for a live or a Zoom interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you do have to move really quick. And sometimes like you've got to really avoid sunk cost fallacy because you think, well, I've
Right.
spent this time with this person. What if so this happened really recently where I brought a guy on and I felt really sorry for him because just he was older, not like super old, but about 41, doing like more of a entry level position and sounded like he had a hard life. And
Hmm.
so there's a lot of empathy there, but he just he wasn't able to complete the work physically. He had a previous
Yeah.
injury that prevented him from doing it, and he had to end early on the second day of training. And so that night, I gave him a call and let him go. And then there was another person that we brought in that had been actually kind of begging for a job, but I had offered this other guy a job first. So yeah, you do have to move quickly. And we do have a 90-day probation period in British Columbia that you're allowed to have. So at any time in that 90 days, someone can be let go for any reason. It doesn't have to be stated. And they do also have a 2-week training period before they are granted a vehicle.
Interesting. That's great. So um, just so much I would love to ask about that. But did you try that last year with the personality test?
Yep. Yeah, I've done that actually since day one, thankfully.
That is awesome. Did you do it to your wife before you got married?
Not before we got married, but one time at Christmas when we were at my parents' house, and this is the first time we heard about it. We all did it as a family together, and then we
So
kind of talked
cool.
about it at the dinner table, which was kind of fun.
Well, because you have a mixed family of step parents and step brothers and sisters, I don't know if any of them were there, but it would have been really mixed results, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I imagine that we are quite different. I think that some people in my family are quite emotional. Like me and my brother are more logical in general, and then some of like my sister and my mom can be a little more emotional. And I guess that's, I mean, it's kind of stereotypical in a sense, but
Yeah, yeah,
um, it was really fascinating, and it was just my parents, like my mom, my stepdad, and my wife and I that did it. But still, it was
fun.
just really interesting. and you get to learn. I mean, just being married, you get to learn how you deal with conflict in different ways.
For sure.
And this is kind of an aside, but one thing that we've learned together, my wife and I, is that in conflict situations, she was raised in a family that would tend to avoid addressing the conflict, which
Mm,
actually has positives in the sense that you don't immediately engage with something. You can just
mm-hmm,
kind of cool down. The problem was that they wouldn't ever address it. And then
mm-hmm.
my family was the opposite extreme. And so whenever there was an issue, we would be very outspoken about it, which is actually not very good in certain circumstances.
No.
You're just always poking at people, and you need to just take a break sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, I can just imagine how that all went down when you guys had issues because you're like, "What? Wow. Why are you acting like that? Why do you feel that way? That's not even logical." And then she's feeling it all and not talking about it.
Exactly, exactly. And so then I needed to learn how to like back off and just
Yeah.
let her be for a while and then engage.
So what are your goals this upcoming year? And then what are your big audacious hairy goals?
Well, for this year, I would love to gross $500,000 in
Okay.
gross revenue. I would love to profit about, and the way it's set up with the corporation is I take dividends, and so the
Okay.
profit would include my salary. But I would love to profit about 33%
Mm-hmm.
in the business. And aside from that, just try to remain somewhat calm in general throughout the season and to be present with people. I really enjoy being able to actually engage with people and connect with them and absorb what they're saying because people are
Mm-hmm.
just really interesting. And I enjoy that. And I know that if I get too busy, it can be like mental overload where it's just like a sponge that's completely full and there's nothing that's going in
Yep.
anymore.
Yep.
So trying to be diligent about even with podcasts and stuff, just pausing them like 10 minutes before I get home so that I can have some silence so that when I'm here, I can actually listen to what my wife is saying
Yeah, that's
a little
smart.
bit better. Um, so those would be the immediate goals. And then in terms of like long term for the business, I would love to have it become an asset that I don't have to trade time for money, that it
Mm-hmm.
just is able to produce cash. The practical goal is to be able to afford a home in the Lower Mainland, and we
Mm-hmm.
might collaborate with my parents to do something where we're all living under the same roof,
Mm-hmm.
separate suites.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of the potential, I think based on the service area and the number of people, it could potentially grow to like a $5 or $10 million location. I don't at this point have a desire to start other locations. Perhaps if there's a really stellar employee and we need to do something with them, we could investigate that. But I think there's enough market in our area that we don't need to really go outside of that. And finally, I just want to learn more about business through doing it, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot of fun, and hope to continue.
Excellent. We've worked a lot with you at Command Center, and can you describe a little bit of what Command Center is and what they do and how it's benefited you?
Well, Command Center is a call center, and they do a lot of the front facing work with the client that is more reactive in nature. And so it allows a business owner to focus on the tasks that generate more leverage in the business and move the business up rather than just forward. And they have benefited me by allowing me to not be so reactive to all the small tasks that come up
Mm-hmm.
throughout the day because it can really, depending on your personality, but it can really throw you off if you're constantly being notified of different little fires that
For
are
sure.
burning rather than focusing on the things that will really propel the business in the right direction. So it's a big blessing to have them answer the phones, respond to emails, and I'll still talk to clients. Like I'll call
Mm-hmm.
the next day to follow up on an estimate, or I'll go into the inbox, and if there's stuff there, I'll deal with it. But I know that it's not all riding on my shoulders, and
Mm-hmm.
they're a great team. Just yesterday, there was a client that was having some issues, and Command Center gave me a call and said, "How do you want to resolve this?" And I said, "Just da da da," and then they executed on that, and it was great. So I think it's also very affordable. So like last year, We spent about 21,000 on command center, like subcontractor fees essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, honestly, that's a heck of a lot cheaper than trying to hire someone. You'd never
True.
hire someone for $21,000 a year around here.
Right.
And also command center, it's like it's pay as you go. So they're accessible a lot of the time, like 5 in Pacific Standard Time, 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays, 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturday. And that's wonderful. So I think that, like, maybe if my wife didn't, if we didn't have kids, if we were younger and we didn't have kids,
Mm-hmm.
I could see her filling the office role
Right.
position. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that can be a good model for some people
Mm-hmm.
if they have a good relationship already established, and the wife does, or the husband, wants to participate in the business. But short of that, it would be very challenging to scale a business like this kind of business
Yeah.
when having a family and to actually maintain the family, because everything takes time.
Right.
Running a business takes time. Running a family takes time. You can't be everywhere at once. And so
Mm-hmm.
having command center allows me to have more time with my family, and it's great.
Yeah. What's funny about what you just said is who's going to work for you 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, plus Saturdays for 8 hours and let you only pay them 21,000. When you put it that way, it's a whole different way to look at it.
Exactly. And it's like, I do believe that command center does things 80% as well as I would do them personally, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
limited. And so that's good. And
Yeah.
that's just the way it is with business in general. It's like
Yeah.
your employees are going to do things 80% as well. If they don't, then find a different employee. But I mean, you can't expect that everyone's going to just do things perfectly all the time. It's not going to scale.
Yeah, exactly. So, can you share what you're currently listening to in regards to podcast, YouTube, anything like that that would help other people? And also, just how do you get your strength, your energy, your clarity of thought? What kind of input are you bringing in?
Well, just some small things. Like, I like to start the day with prayer, and usually that's just silence essentially, but for 10 minutes. And in the Orthodox tradition, we have icons, so like images of Christ, and so or of the saints, and so forth. But I just sit or actually kneel in front of my icons for like 10 minutes in the morning, and that's really good. And then go about my day. The day kind of unfolds as it will. And then at the end of the day, I do like to read scripture, and it's a good way to I read it until I get tired and my face is like laying in my
I
Bible.
love it.
And then I go to bed.
That's a good way to
And
go to
then,
bed.
yeah, and little like tricks for sleep, and it depends on who you are, but I try to not look at a screen 1 hour before I'm going to bed, and also I try to not eat or drink 2 hours before I'm going to bed,
Smart.
just so that I don't have to get up in the middle of the night to go to the washroom or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So those have been little helpful tricks for me. And then in terms of listening to things, I like listening to a podcast that is focused on macroeconomics, but as it pertains to Canada, called The
Mm-hmm.
Loonie Hour, which is really great. And I also have been listening to, I finished a book called, on Audible, it was 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene,
Yeah, how
which,
was that? I don't think I've read the book.
I think like you got to use your discernment when you're reading that one. I wouldn't want to give it to someone that would just apply it to anything, because I'm like, oh, some of these things are pretty sinister in here. But
Okay.
but I think it's helpful in terms of like, okay, yeah, some people do things that way. And then I started this book called Mindset by
Mm-hmm. Carol
Dweck. I
Dweck.
think that's the one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So about like the fixed mindset and the growth mindset, and just how people respond to failure, whether it's an opportunity to grow or it's an opportunity to like destroy themselves. So that's been interesting. I've heard a lot about like fixed mindset, growth mindset, so it's nice to actually get to the source of it.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, that's most of it for right now.
I love it. So, can you tell me how you've most benefited from being a part of Augusta? Have you created relationships, chat with people, voice notes, emails? How, do you get your support? And overall, how do you think it's benefited you as a person?
Yeah, so Augusta is a great community. I think very positive people that are focused on changing themselves, getting their businesses to the next level, focusing on what they can do and not complaining about things. So I think that the culture is really healthy and a great
Hmm.
thing to be a part of. One of my professors in college, he said, show me your friends and I'll show you your future.
I
And I
love
think
it.
that's absolutely true with Augusta, that if you want to excel in lawn care, just get around people that are aiming in that direction. They're aiming up
Hmm.
with you. And I think Augusta has that culture. Um, with the franchisees in the Lower Mainland, now there's a number of us, and so there's the Coquitlam location, which was actually first, and there's our location in Burnaby. There's a location in Delta, and then there's one in the west end of Vancouver. And so we've just started having these open book masterminds where we'll
Hmm.
get together at the start of the year, kind of in February. We just had one, and then in the middle of the year, in the summer when it's a bit slower, and we'll
Smart.
just talk about how things are going. We will share our profit and loss statements and we'll send them out prior to the meeting so that we can get a read on how everyone's doing and just learn from other people's experiences and talk about our plans for the upcoming part of the year, what's going well, what we might be struggling with. So
Hmm.
I would say, yeah, it's this nice to, because you wouldn't actually really do that with competitors because there
No,
would be a lot of doubt or questioning about people's intentions.
for sure.
And it's great that we've got these separate territories that we're responsible for, but we're all playing for the same team. Like
Hmm.
when one person excels, the other person excels because we're flying under the same flag. We have the same brand that we're
Hmm.
adhering to. So that's super helpful. And it's like a synergy that just propels us faster.
Hmm. So it's almost like instead of just being it's um, it's all of you together having accountability partners on top of a support team.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it would be very difficult to replicate that elsewhere. I know that there
Hmm.
sometimes are masterminds, but maybe those aren't always specific to an industry, or
Right.
maybe if they are, they're not specific to a geographical location. Like you
Hmm.
might have a mastermind of lawn care people from across the states, but to have people in your local market that know the particular conditions of that market and what's unique about it, and to be able to converse with them on that um, deep of a level, I think
Hmm.
it, like unless you had like a really big corporate structure where everyone was under the same umbrella, it'd be hard to do. So I think this is the only other way that you could have that
Yeah,
happen.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome. So we're going to start wrapping it up now, but it's not often that you actually have a platform where sometimes you're working and you think, man, if I could just tell somebody who's starting out this, or I'm so glad I learned this, and you just have this urge that you want to share. Um, I was wondering if you could share a little bit with other people, maybe in your place or from where you've come, and just give something from your heart that you think would benefit them.
Absolutely. So I think about this and things that I would do differently. Um, I think in terms of my own life, I probably would have postponed the masters and started knowing what I know now. So
Hmm.
this is a fantasy essentially, but college I think was really beneficial for me. It really gave me some great mentors and friendships and matured me in a lot of ways. I would say that starting a business after that would have been a great decision because business needs time to grow and to develop. And I think that like my education was relatively cheap, but in the States it's a completely different story in terms of how expensive education is. So as a strategy, I think if you're like a young man or young woman, it's a great idea to create some sort of asset that produces cash that you don't have to trade your time for, because you're going to get older as a person. You're going to have less energy. You'll have more experience, which is a benefit, but you may as well if you want to. And I think that there are certain personalities that are better at starting businesses, but if that's you, um, you should try starting something, even if it's not a lawn care business. Just try starting something that can produce cash, because then what you can do is in the rest of your life, go and get your education, go and do these other things. But you know that there's the money coming in constantly and you've got that to rely on. And so I think people get it flipped sometimes. And I think I slightly got it flipped in the sense of doing all the educational stuff first and then starting the business. I wasn't aiming at business, I just kind of fell into it. But if I would be able to do it again, I would do that. And then around here, I think it might be different in certain parts of the States, but trying to get into some sort of real estate earlier on so that rather than just sending money to pay for rent, which you
Mm-hmm.
get the value from it immediately, but then you don't capture the value in any long-term sense. So if you're able to trade that money for even a condo or something where you're actually creating some sort of asset for the future, that can be beneficial. I wouldn't say to get distracted by that, like put your money into the business if you're doing that, because you're going to get a better investment there. But you may as well be smart with your money too and try to put it into something that will you'll be able to tap into in the future if you sell that real estate. So I would say that. And I watched this. I'll give one more thing. I just
Sure.
watched an interesting interview on Jordan Peterson's channel. It was called Unplanned Childlessness, and I think that that's really fascinating. That there's, again, because we get very wrapped up in focusing on career and stuff. I think if you want to have a family, just start your family. Like, don't
Yes.
wait until everything's in line. Don't wait until everything's perfect, because a lot of people do that, and it's too late, or it becomes very difficult, because with women there is a window of opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
have children, and so it's important to capitalize on that, because if you're wanting to have a family, that's the time to do it. And you can't reverse the clock. And most people, in general, again, there are exceptions, but most people get their primary meaning from their immediate family. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'd say, go into business, buy a house, start a family.
That's wonderful. So you are so articulate and so gifted at saying things with your words and expressing them. It's really been an honor and a privilege to host you today. And can you close us out with a quote or quotes or something that the listeners can take away from?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got two quotes. One is from Jordan Peterson, who I've mentioned a couple times. It's set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world.
Oh, that's so
And
good.
the second one is very similar, but it's got more of a spiritual tone to it. It's from Saint Seraphim of Sarov, who was a monk in the 1800s. And he said, acquire a spirit of peace, and thousands around you will be saved.
Wow, that's beautiful. Wow, that's awesome. I'll have to write that one on my fridge.
Yeah, that's really one of my favorites.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will let you go, but thank you again for your time today. I know it'll benefit a lot of people.
Thanks, Liz. It's
All right.
been an
Thank
honor.
you. Have a good day.